I live alone on the 7th floor of a walk-up in Astoria. The night the grid failed, everything felt staged. Air heavy, windows open, voices carrying. At 1:17 a.m., someone knocked and said my first name. "Hey, Maya, con Edison. We're doing emergency checks." No power means no intercom, no cameras, no elevator. Just my deadbolt and a cheap flashlight. I looked through the peephole and saw black. Then a pinprick of light slid across the lens, too close to be safe. The voice came again, softer. "Maya, you in there? You don't want gas building up." I hadn't cooked all day. "My stove is electric." I said nothing. Down the hall, a baby cried. The knock turned into a slow scrape near the peephole, metal on metal. I felt the hairs on my arms rise. Someone was unscrewing it. I dragged my dresser to the doorframe and slid the chain across anyway. My phone had 9% battery and 2 bars. 911 put me on hold. I texted my neighbor across the hall, "You home?" and watched the typing bubble appear, disappear, reappear. Another sound. The whispery squeak of a fire escape stepped to the left of my window. 2 apartments sit over that metal ladder. I blew out my candle, crouched behind the couch, and opened voice memos to record. A second voice outside said, "She's right there," like he knew where I was. Then, as if reciting lines, the first voice repeated the cone sentence. My neighbor finally replied, "Not home. Cops said stay inside. People in fake vests." The peephole popped out and rolled across the floor like a coin. A fingertip fished at the chain. I pressed my car key fob against the window screen and hit panic. My sedan, 3 floors down, screamed awake. The voices froze. Feet clanged on the fire escape, fast, then faded. I found a ring of black tape around the peephole outside, and marks where pliers had turned. Across the river that same night, I was house-sitting my sister's narrow row house in Jersey City Heights. The blackout turned the block into a tunnel. No street lamps, no traffic, just battery radios chattering from open windows. At 12:09 a.m., someone knocked using my sister's exact rhythm. 2 quick, 1 long. Then her voice through the window. "Open up, Em. My phone died." My sister was in Cabo, 5 time zones and 1,000 miles away. I'd FaceTimed her at sunset. I stayed still on the stairs and watched the letter slot. A slim beam slid through and swept the foyer like a knife. The voice tried again, lower, almost playful. "Em, you moved the spare from the blue planter, remember? That used to be true. I moved it last month." I called 911 and got classical hold music. The beagle I was babysitting, Penny, stood rigid, head tilted at the door. Somewhere outside, another voice said, "Municipal check. Gas risk." I hadn't smelled a thing, and the house was fully electric. The knob twitched like a pulse. The letter slot lifted, and something thin scraped around inside the bedroom. The voice tried again, lower, almost playful. I killed the candle and crawled to the kitchen. The blackout made the mirrors. In the third pane, a shoulder eclipsed the glass, pressed close enough to fog it. Penny barked and the solar motion flood in the yard flared, cold, white, sudden. A man in a reflective vest flinched, ducked, and crab-walked out of the cone of light. He wasn't alone. Another shape moved behind the trash cans, patient. I hit the car horn fob hanging by the back door. My sister keeps it for street cleaning. A blast echoed off the brick. Footsteps sprinted. By the time officers rolled by 20 minutes later, the stoop was empty, but 2 things waited under the mat. A zip tie cinched on the gate latch, and a chirping AirTag I'd never heard before. I rent the garden unit of a brownstone in Bed-Stuy. 1 door to the street, 1 door to a tiny yard hemmed by chain link. When the power died, the block became a cave. At 2:43 a.m., my front deadbolt turned 1 clean click like a polite hello. The chain caught. A man's voice pressed up to the wood. "Super. Leak from upstairs. Open now." My super is a woman named Etta. The voice didn't wait for me to answer. The peephole went dark, as if a thumb covered it. Liquid blossomed under the threshold and ran toward my toes. Instinct said water. My nose said bleach. "There is no leak," I said. "What's Etta's last name?" The voice paused, then went gravelly authoritative. City Inspector. Basement units have to open. A laminated card slid under the door. Exigent access in block letters. No logo, no number. The knob twitched. Something thin probed the chain. I cracked the bathroom window to the yard. The alley was syrup black. A headlamp bloomed behind the trash barrels and snapped off. I shut the window and threw the bolt. My phone had 11%, and the emergency lines were jammed. I opened the boiler closet, reached in, and twisted the main water valve closed. No sound, no pressure change, no leak from anywhere. I set it through the wood, steady. I shut my water. If you hear running, it's not me. Silence. Then from the yard, a whisper. Back's clear. The front voice dropped the pretense. You live alone, right? We can see only one electric meter. I grabbed my camping lantern, set it on the floor behind the door, and hit the strobe mode. The flashing turned the chain gap into a blinking knife slit. I shoved a chair under the knob and slid a metal bar into the hinge side. The probe at the chain became more deliberate, patient. I opened the voice memos app and a file I keep for earthquakes, 20 minutes of recorded mail chatter. I hit play and put the phone on the bookshelf by the door. The recorded baritone rolled through the wood, overlapping into a low hum of men swapping stories I'd staged months ago. The man at the door went still. Outside, near the cans, the whisper changed shape. Hold. To inside. The probe withdrew from the chain slot. For a full breath, I heard only the lantern strobing against the wood, the faint shiver of bleach under the threshold. Then the yard whisper returned, closer now, backlatch. A headlamp blinked on and slid along the bottom of the door like a scalpel. The chain went tight. I brought the crank radio from the emergency kit, flipped to alert, and let the siren rip. It wasn't music, it was fury. One shrieking tone that made the knob chatter. Above me, feet hit hardwood, and someone yelled down the stairwell, "Yo, you good?" The headlamp snapped off. I kept the siren screaming and shouted, "Etta," until I heard her boots in the vestibule. "Open for nobody," she said, loud enough for the whole building. A voice from the yard drifted over the fence. They're awake. Then the slow cough of a van that hadn't started clean in years. We waited with the siren until the block felt like a stirred beehive. Neighbors at windows, phones lighting faces the grid couldn't. By the time 2 officers wrapped the glass, my threshold told the story the intruders tried to control. Bleach smear, dirty wedge marks, a square of matte black tape over the keyway. Etta pointed to the meter closet outside. Someone had chalked a 1 in a circle next to my unit weeks before, something I'd never noticed. 2 other doors on the block were the same mark. In the morning, a thread lit up in the neighborhood chat. Fake utility checks, zip-tied gates, AirTags chirping from planters, peepholes ringed with tape. Not ghosts, then just people who move like shadows when the city stops humming. I keep the strobe and siren handy.